Good evening and welcome everyone. I'm Neil Thomason, AFT Connecticut's Communications Technology Specialist. Usually our Professional Development Coordinator, Jennifer Benevento, hosts these PD webinars, but I'm filling in for her as she is currently on maternity leave. I also want you all to know that this webinar is being recorded. It is our hope to email a link of the video to all the registered people in the upcoming weeks. I'm going to post a link now in the chat box for a quick feedback survey. If you would all please click that when the webinar is over, we'd greatly appreciate it. That's how we learn what our members are looking for in professional development opportunities. I will remind you again at the end. And I'd like to welcome Betsey Howe, who will be presenting today's webinar, Peer Support for Students with Disabilities. Betsey is at the Association of University Centers on Disabilities and is the CDC Fellow for the ACT Early Response to COVID-19 project. In this position, she supports this project's work related to family-engaged developmental monitoring and screening for autism and other developmental delays in response to the pandemic. All right, Betsey, take it away.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get us started. All right, so we are going to be talking tonight about how we use peers to help students succeed. So tonight we're going to do a quick round of introductions. I'm going to start us off with a couple of activities to get our brain juices flowing. Then I'm going to go over some evidence-based strategies for how you can support children to socially interact with one another. Then we're going to have another group activity, and then we are going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on all of this. I'm also going to provide you with some resources, and then we'll have questions and wrap up. Because this is a nice small group, I want you to feel free to unmute if you have a question or a comment that you want to share as we go through this as well. And I was going to use breakout rooms because there's only 8 of us here. I think we'll just kind of all stick together. So the training objectives are that as a result of this training, you'll be able to reflect on times during the day where you can have students with disabilities involved with peers. You're going to develop a list of strategies that you can use on how you have peers help students with disabilities succeed. You're going to be able to describe the strategies which have an empirical support for facilitating social interactions between children with and without disabilities. And you're going to be able to identify a resource that you can use after this training session. So I'd like to go around, and I'm going to actually stop sharing. And again, because we are a small group, we can do this verbally. And I just want you to tell me who you are, your role in education, and the age of the children that you support. And I'll just call on you based on how you appear on my screen. And I'm going to start with iPad 5, which is a lovely name.
Is it me?
That's you.
Oh, okay. I don't have, oh, there it is, iPad 5. I am sorry. My name is Joanna Rooney. I work at Regional School District 13. I'm a special ed assistant teacher. I work mostly with behavior and some lower functioning students, more in the life, some in the life skills. Last few years, I've been working mostly with life skills kids.
And how old are they?
Junior high school.
Junior high school, okay.
Yeah.
And what communities are in, was it Region 16, did you say?
It's Durham, Middlefield, and Rockfall.
Okay. And Donna Jasminski.
Hi, I'm Donna Jasminski. I work at a Simsbury Elementary School with 6 children in 3rd grade and 6 children in 2nd grade. I've worked with K through 4, 5 mainly. Their ages, well, appropriate with their grade. A special education paraprofessional, and I look forward to getting some good tips.
All right, and then how about E. Burdick?
I'm Kathy Burdick, and I work at Wyndham, and I work in the high school high school age kids. I've also worked with 18 to 21-year-olds at the high school level. But this year I'm currently working with primarily, well, I've got all 4 grade levels, I guess, out and about from ID to severely disabled.
Also at the high school level?
Yep.
Okay, and Leslie Abrams.
Hi, I'm Leslie Abrahams. I'm a special ed teacher. I've worked in a number of different settings. Currently, I'm working in Hartford with students, grades 1, 2, and 3. And I am interested in, your ideas of how to have the typical peer how typical peers embrace kids with special needs.
Mhm. Great. All right, Donna,
Yes,
you're next.
I was already up.
Did you tell me your role in the age of children you work with?
I did. Yep.
Wait, okay,
Symptoms.
1102, is that you too? Are you in 2 places?
I do not know who the 110.
Dorothy, I haven't figured you out yet, sorry. Dorothy, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Dorothy Wilkerson, early childhood teacher. I work with K-3 right now. I'm working with autistic children as well as other children with behavioral needs. That's about it.
Okay, thank you, Dorothy. All right, and last is Chris.
Hi, let's see. Hi, I'm Chris Olden. I work in the Norwalk school system as a para, currently in the 3rd grade as a one-on-one. But there are other SPED kids in the class as well that I help out with. So I'm looking how to be able to service more of them.
All right, great. Well, I'm glad we're all here together tonight. We're going to get started with an activity. So I'm going to share my screen again really quick. We're going to start with some opening activities to get our brain juices flowing. But before we do that, I just wanted to I want to illustrate the importance of your role. Excuse me, I'm choking. As assistants and paraeducators working with children with disabilities, you are the fastest growing area of workforce personnel in special education. There are actually more paraeducators than there are teachers who work with children with disabilities. And the reason when I was in Connecticut, I'm no longer in Connecticut, when I was in Connecticut, I worked with the Paraeducator Advisory Council. And why I'm here tonight is because I think your role in the field is critically important and underutilized, and with training and a need for training being the most important thing to offer. So that is why I'm here tonight. And I just kind of wanted to lift you up a little bit about the importance of your role. But we are going to hone in on how we get peers involved with children with disabilities and how they can be involved in a way that helps them to be successful in the classroom, in their learning, and ultimately why it's important for their long-term outcomes. So you guys should have received a matrix in your packet. Did everybody get a matrix? Nope. Okay, I'm seeing no. Okay, I can share it in the chat. No. This matrix is going to what it is it's basically a table, and you are Okay, so in the chat box, you should be able to click on that document and open it up. So basically what this is it's a table. And in the left-hand column, I've listed out typical activities that I know about from an early childhood setting and from an elementary setting. Those of you who are working in junior high and high school, you might have additional activities. One of these mentioned something about life skills. You might have something about life skills there. And what you're going to do is you're going to use that matrix to identify opportunities when children are have the ability to be around. So the students that you work with, when they have the ability to be around children who do not have disabilities. And so basically you're just going to go through that and you're going to identify the times. We're going to do this individually. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do that. When we come back, we're going to share a little bit about some of the times during the day that your students have opportunities to interact with children who do not have disabilities. Does anybody have any questions?
I can't find the matrix you were talking about.
So when you go to chat down at the bottom of your screen,
Okay.
Click on chat.
My screen is not doing the chat thing. It's not coming up for some reason. It's an iPad, so
that may be why. I'll tell you what
Yeah.
I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen. I'll pull it up on the screen so you can see it.
okay.
Okay,
Right.
because I don't have it in my chat either.
You don't have
I
it
don't have
either?
it either.
Okay. So give me 1 second to open up the document on my computer. Then I will share my screen. This is all the challenges of technology here, guys.
Yep.
We only start having fun when we have technological glitches. That's when it gets exciting. All right, can you guys see the matrix?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so just jot down, grab a piece of paper and just jot down the different times during the day when there are opportunities for social interactions. And you're gonna take about 5 minutes to do that. The rest of the matrix is gonna be, we're gonna use for the upcoming activities. And Neil, I don't know if there's some way we can get this to them.
Do you want that written right on here or?
Well, you're not gonna be able to write right on here because it's the
Okay,
screen, so you're
all
gonna
right.
have to grab a different piece of
Okay.
paper.
Can you mail the matrix out to anyone?
That's what I'm asking Neil, if he can mail it to you guys. I ask that you get a copy of it when you register.
Yeah, I got none.
I would need emails to do that.
Yeah, I got mine in my confirmation email with a reminder in the middle of the week.
Yes, I got a confirmation email too a while, 2 days ago, or yeah.
Ah, yep, I've got it on my email. I didn't see it there.
It was hiding.
Unfortunately, I didn't get an email. I got a text asking if I was attending yesterday.
That's what I got.
Yes. So I don't have anything
Do,
other than that.
so who is saying that? So Donna, you didn't get it?
No, unfortunately not.
And who's the other person who's saying they didn't get it?
That was iPad 5.
Okay.
I forgot her name.
Donna, do you have access to the chat? Could you
I
put your,
do, and I did, and it told me to copy the link and put it in my browser, which I do not have access to right now because I'm in a Zoom meeting. So
if you put your email address in the chat box, I'll email it to you. Anybody
Alright.
else who doesn't have it, and you can access the chat, put your email in there, and then I'll send it out in an email.
all right, I'm gonna put my my personal address because I'm not on my school
Your
computer.
school computer, yep, okay.
Let me know after you've sent it and I'll leave the meeting and then I'll come back in so I can print it
You
out,
shouldn't
okay?
have to, you shouldn't have to leave the meeting. You should be able to toggle between screens. And I did send it.
I never got anything either. I'm looking through emails now on the phone.
What's your email address?
My personal email address is maddhousewife@sbcglobal.net.
Okay, so MADDHOUSE.
WIFE.
Mad Housewife.
4 boys, you're a mad housewife. At sbcglobal.net.
And also, if the Zoom is taking up your full screen, there's a view option where you could.
Oh, yes, that's
exit
exactly
full
what it
screen.
is. Yep.
And that way you could see documents behind it.
I can't get to the view so I can get on another tab. Oh, never mind. I see it.
You found it?
Exit full screen.
Yes. All right, so I'm gonna, for those of you who had an opportunity to sort of think of some times during the day, what are different activities during the school day that your students have the opportunity to be around children without disabilities?
On mine is when they enter my district and this building I work in, we do a lot to integrate the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Usually when they come off the bus, as they're walking to class, people say hi to them. The kids there are pretty good with the children with the disabilities. They get acknowledged as they come in. They also have lunch period, which they intermingle with all the other kids. And usually we always have 1 or 2 regular kids come and sit at the table with them. And they play with them with mass breaks. They would go out and they interacted. There's a lot of interaction. We also have after school group called Best Buds.
Yep.
And they participate in that. And we also have the Special Olympics that unfortunately last year they couldn't play
Right.
with other schools, but we did do some minor competitions within the school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, they will go into a regular class every now and then, maybe something like social studies, but they're usually off to the side a little bit and doing more modified. Whatever the subject is. Some of them a couple of years ago were pretty low. We were studying China, for instance. So we just had them color different things that had to do with China. We had some printouts. We tried doing some origami with them, and just little things that they can sort of get involved with and feel like they were part of the class. And even then, some the regular students would come over and help out with the project. So it was pretty good.
What other times during the day are, Chris?
Well, my students mainstreamed. So
They're in the classroom all the time.
They're in the classroom all the time, and they are generally given the opportunity to interact, but sometimes because of either communication skills or certainly time constraints, by the time my student's ready to process what she's ready to say, the class has moved on to something else. So we're always there physically. But interaction isn't always as easy as it should be.
Does anybody else have any other times or activities?
We actually have a period at the end of the day where we have a couple of students who come in and hang out, participate with our kids. that type of thing. So the last period is like a resource room for some of our kids. And we have a regular ed kid who comes in because he prefers it, and he'll get help if he needs it. But if not, he'll be there with our kids. They'll play Cahoots, or one day we lost power in the building. So one of our students was joking with him about not turning the light switch on because the power wouldn't come on anyway. So it's an interaction time with them. And then when they see him in the hall, they think it's a cool thing to say hi to him.
Good. All right. So lots of different types of activities across the day for having opportunities where kids are together. All right. So what I'd like to do now is take a look at our next activity. Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Whoops. All right. We did group sharing. So now we are going to talk a little bit about the strategies that we already use to support interactions between children with and without disabilities. If you have the matrix, you can use the matrix to keep track of this. But what I want you guys to do right now is to really talk to one another about when you have your student or students with a disability and there are other children without disabilities around, what do you do right now to support social interactions between them?
We usually have some kind of, like I said, like a class project, and usually kids will volunteer to come in and work with them. And lunches also, like I said, yeah, pretty much everything what we on our days anyway, there is quite a bit of interaction with the kids. So even in mass breaks, they'll go out, and my lower one, I have one that likes to play 1, 2, 3 red light. And you know, you've got like 10 regular kids out there wanting to play with them. So he always gets a high five. And there's always a lot of interaction in the hallways. So with us, it's not that tough to be able to get them to be around other kids.
I think it's harder at the high school level just because of the differences. A lot of our kids are like 2nd and 3rd grade levels. Some are even lower than that. And so like you can take them into a class and interact with them, but it's not always, you can't do the same work. And so a lot of times they get taken out for resource rooms and things like that because of that. So I think it's harder at that level.
I would agree with that.
Get them to interact. But I know I've done a band class with a student and the kids just accepted him for, you know, even though he was being assisted by me, we talked to him, we talked with the kids when they had subs and stuff, they had him hang out with them. So it became just a normal thing. And I actually had to step out one day to use ladies' room. And I was like, I'm going to leave him. I'm not going to come. They're like, oh, just leave him. He's fine. He's with us. And I felt very comfortable doing that and just getting him involved in that way.
That's nice.
Usually the strategies that I use are basic common sense type strategies, including the children in conversations, asking them questions or finding commonality between all of them. And usually if I introduce it, they kind of take off on it and go on their own. Where I find it difficult is when I have an extremely shy, very withdrawn student, getting them to be, usually a strategy I try to pick a student who I think is going to be receptive and get them to talk more. but I could really use some ideas on that.
Well, we can talk more about that. So I just want to tell you, so we're going to move on now into, I'll share with you very sort of high level overview of what we know about research informed practices that support peer social interactions. But part of going through this process was to kind of get you thinking about what it is that you're already doing, because part of what I want you to do is understand what you're already doing and how it's linked to the evidence, and to help support your intentionality in the things that you do, as well as to think about new things to try. So you've already described to me things that are backed up in the research. And Donna, I think you said it very nicely, because it's common sense. If you're engaged in teaching and you care about kids and you know that you want peers, children interacting with one another, you're going to be thinking about how to do this. So we're going to go back to the PowerPoint. And I'm going to go over these strategies. Are you guys seeing the?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
So we are going to talk about peer social interaction interventions, or PSII, which are evidence-based practices to support child interactions and friendships. And we're going to start by just briefly touching on why this is so important. Why are peer social interactions so important? The reason they're so important is that when children are successful in their interactions with one another, and this is for all children, including children with disabilities, they develop what we call social competence, or peer social competence. Peer social competence is really a construct for thinking about how children interact with one another and what goes into that. But essentially, when children are socially competent, they are engaging all parts of their development and their learning. All parts of that are interacting with one another to facilitate social competence. And because of that, in turn, that interaction supports them to be socially competent. So social competence is peer social interactions, which lead to peer social competence, which then result in friendships. And what the research tells us, and not just in education, but the research tells us across many different social sciences, and as well as within education, is that friendship and a sense of belonging is the single best longitudinal predictor of positive outcomes across the lifespan. People who have children, people who have friends starting at a very young age, do better in school. They are more likely to go to college. They are more likely to get a job. They are less likely to experience negative outcomes, such as loss of job or getting into trouble. So focusing on peer social competence and supporting children in being in having friendships is really, really important, but it gets lost behind this need to push a very rigid academic agenda and to hold schools accountable. So I'm going to go over, but the good news is that we can embed these into these strategies that we're going to talk about now, can be embedded into all different kinds of activities and routines, including academic learning. So there are four categories that I'm going to talk about in terms of peer social interaction interventions. The first is environmental arrangements. The second is teacher-mediated interventions. The third is peer-mediated interventions. And the fourth is a combined approach strategies. And I'm going to go through each one of these to illustrate some examples of what this looks like. So environmental arrangements is the easiest group of practices to implement. If you are used to understanding multi-tiered systems of supports, these are basically your tier 1 practices. They're good for all kids. They're easy. It really has to do with your the overall general education, classroom, and curriculum. But specific strategies include creating small spaces in a classroom so children are near one another. And for junior high and high school, that could be making sure that there's a table. It's a small table, maybe off to the side, but there's both children with and without disabilities there. Using toys or other activities that promote social interactions between children with and without disabilities. And I heard mention for those older grades of things like playing games like Cahoots or the red light, green light. So it's not just toys, it's activities that promote social interactions. Creating play groups or other types of groups. We could also create learning groups or work groups. I heard about the child coming into the resource room in the afternoon. So maybe there's some learning that can happen in that, in a group there. But again, it includes both children with and without disabilities. And then using stories or other types of literature that promote social interactions between children with and without disabilities. So that could be having reading groups in which you are, the children without disabilities are maybe supporting the reading skills of children with disabilities. Teacher-mediated interventions. We're now moving along this continuum of intensity. Teacher-mediated interventions are more of the things that you're going to do as the adult. It's the direct instruction that you're going to provide, and what is that going to look like? One is making sure that an activity has high structure. So, and when I say high structure, it means that you've planned it out beforehand. There's a lesson plan and there's some teaching strategies that you're going to implement. And there's expectations for what children with disabilities are going to do and learn. And if you're including children without disabilities in this, because this could also be pre-teaching, what are they going to be doing? You're using direct instruction to teach children with disabilities social skills. So that might mean that you're going to prompt them to, say hi to your friends, or let's hold hands with your friends, or go and get your friend and have them come over here. You're doing something to really prompt the child with a disability. And in this particular category, the focus is on what you're teaching the child with a disability. You're going to model the social skills that you want them to use. Let's give them a high five, as well as prompting them. And you're going to use praise, because we want to make sure that the child with a disability is understanding, this is the behavior I want you to use, and when you use it, I'm gonna let you know. And then you're going to correct them if they make a mistake, because when children are learning new things, they make mistakes. So you're going to correct them and then prompt them again to do the thing that you want them to see. So this is where you're going to use the more direct teaching instruction that you use with children. The third category is peer-mediated interventions. This group of interventions has the most empirical support behind it. However, it is the least utilized, or at least we think it's the least utilized. I actually don't think it's the least utilized. This is the one I really want you to understand and think about, because I heard a lot of you already saying that you were doing some of this. And so I want you to be thinking about that and reflecting on it and how you can be really intentional about this. But this is where you're focusing now your teaching efforts, not on the child with a disability, but on the child without a disability. And you want to teach them how to interact. So what are you going to do? You're going to prompt a child without a disability to socially interact with a child with a disability. You're going to teach a child without a disability to persist in getting that child with a disability to respond to them. So this could be where you have your lunchtime group that one of you described. So maybe you want a child without a disability to have a conversation with a child with a disability. So you're going to prompt them. You're going to tell them what to do. Can you ask so-and-so how how their day is going? Or I'm just kind of making things up right now. And then they're going to do that, but the child with a disability doesn't necessarily respond. So what we have to do is we have to teach children who don't have disabilities to persist, to do it again and to do it again, because kids are going to if they don't get an immediate response, they're going to give up. That's normal. So we really have to support them in continuing to do that. Then you're also going to be directing now your praise to the child without a disability. So if they follow your prompt, if they persist, you're going to praise them you're in some way. You're going to really let them know you're really helping. This is really helping. And you're also going to provide reinforcement. If you're really structuring it, you're going to reinforce in some kind of way. And that can be in a variety of different ways. And some of that reinforcement will come naturally over time. And I heard you already describing it to me, that the reinforcement comes from the enjoyment in interacting with their friends who might also have a disability. So you have to just gauge, do I need to have something else in here? Or is this enough for the child without a disability? The fourth group is combined approaches. And this is basically where you are selecting different things from the other three categories and you're putting them together. And you're probably already doing this anyway. You're creating spaces where kids with and without disabilities can come together. You're teaching the child with a disability what you want them to do. And you're also teaching the child without a disability. You're providing praise. You're providing these things. It's just thinking about this again in a little bit more, being intentional about it, understanding what you're doing and the ramifications of what you're doing, and what is it that you want to see happen as a result of it. And ultimately, I think what we want to have happen is that we see social interactions between children increasing. We see that they're having fun. We see enjoyment, and we see the beginnings of a friendship or ongoing friendships. So now we are going to have our third group activity. And in this activity, we are going to talk about the practices that you are already using. You've described them to me. And then I want you to think about and talk about what are some things that maybe you could use in the future. Something that you heard me talk about right now that you kind of went like, oh, aha. So I'm going to stop sharing. And again, because we are a small group, we're just going to do this. We don't need to go into breakout rooms, but we do have a new participant who has joined us. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi.
Caitlin, can you just tell us your role and the age of children you work with?
Fifth graders, special ed.
As a teacher or assistant teacher?
Teacher.
Teacher, okay. All right, so we have been talking about, we started out by going over the different types of activities that we have during a typical day in which children with and without disabilities are together. Because in order to support social interactions between children, they have to be together. And some of the activities that were described include arrival, transitions, lunch periods, best buddies, Special Olympics, play, opportunities in the regular classroom, including the whole day because it's an integrated inclusive classroom setting, or for specific activities such as social studies. And then we also talked about the different types of things that we are already doing that facilitate interactions between children with and without disabilities. And some of the things that were talked about include having a class project, getting kids involved in other kinds of projects, such as a band project, talking to children without disabilities about what to do, including children with and without disabilities in conversation with one another, finding common interests, teaching them how to introduce, deliberately pairing children together, and using peers as models. And then we just went over different types of strategies that we know from the research literature have evidence that they are support interactions between children with and without disabilities. So I'd like to open it up now to talk about what you sort of heard as I went over those practices that you're like, oh, I do that. And what you heard that was like, ooh, and here's what I could do differently. Here's how I can expand upon what I'm already doing. And Donna, I saw you kind of go, uh-huh. So do you want to go ahead and start sharing?
Sure. Something that jogged my memory while you were talking is doing role playing. I had kind of forgotten about doing that with some kids. In two aspects of it. One, with the child without the disability, kind of role playing beforehand,
Yes.
before their interaction. And now that I know the students more, I can anticipate how they'll respond to that. So I can teach the child without the disability how to persist with it.
Yes. Yeah, great. That's fantastic.
So I think role playing is something I'm definitely going to put on
That's
my
fantastic.
agenda. Thanks.
There is a evidence-based intervention called Stay, what is it? Stay, Talk, and Play. I'm getting it. I'm probably not remembering it correctly, but that's a component of it, is through role play to teach children how to, and this is children without the disabilities, how to interact with the child with a disability. And so that's like the first step, is through, that's the teaching to the child with without the disability, is using role play.
And you think it's called what?
Stay, Play, and Talk.
Okay, I'll Google it and see what I can find.
Yeah, it's Howard Goldstein is the researcher who developed it.
Okay.
And that is a type of peer mediated intervention.
Yep. Perfect.
Anybody else? Any aha moments?
There are times when you have your typical middle school pranky things that they do. Sometimes they huddle all up into a group of, for instance, a group of boys, and they start just doing silly things. So for us, it's been to just kind of make sure that the child with a disability doesn't really get into that, because they were doing like that whole pinching thing from a couple of years ago, you know, and that was a type of thing where this particular student, he probably had an IQ of like maybe a 3-year-old, so that was his basic behavior, but he was built like a bull in a china shop, so he didn't know how to not pinch so hard. And so they finally put the kibosh on doing that during after lunch and things like that. But that was just one of the things that I found that he wants to, or they wanted to just see what the crowd of kids are gathered over there and see what they're doing. So that's when we have to keep our close eye on the activity and make sure they don't do or harm themselves or someone else. We've had a couple of incidences in the past years where we had one student was shown by others how to write like love letters to another student. And we caught that too, because it was supposed to be a coloring activity, and there were just a couple of them that were just doing things, getting them into stuff that they don't understand due to their disability and cognitive mental age. But other than that, I think it's been mostly positive.
So did you hear anything in what I went over that could help you sort of recreate what's happening? Because middle schoolers are going to do things like that. That's what happens in middle school.
Yeah.
So did you hear anything, or did it spark anything around what you might do to recreate an experience in which they're able to interact with one another, but it's appropriate?
We do. I like the idea where in the smaller, break them up into smaller groups.
Mm-hmm.
On occasion, if the one student needs OT or maybe some PT. We've taken stuff out and modeled to the regular student how to do things, or we'll play the game with them and then kind of step back gradually while the peer gets more involved with the activity. A lot of it was like basic, even just like we had one that had to work on tossing a ball and catching. And we would sometimes even pull a kid out who was walking in the hallway during a tutorial or something and say, would you like to come in and play with us? And they would come in.
I'm sure they would much rather go play ball than go to tutorial.
Yeah. But for a lot of them, ones that were more caught up on things, their own schoolwork, they were able to come in and just help out with things like that. So.
And you described one important thing to be thinking about when you're doing this. So obviously in the strategies that I went over, you saw some that are definitely more adult led and adult directed. And sometimes we need that. There needs to be deliberate teaching that goes on. But it's important to think about how to then fade yourself out of it. And that's what you described doing. Because what happens if we don't do that is that it becomes about the adult. The interactions, kids are likely, especially when they're younger, for those of you working with younger kids, are gonna be more likely to turn their attention to the adult than to remain focused on the children. So it's always important to be thinking about, okay, I'm gonna set this up. It's gonna be, they're in a small group. I'm gonna introduce a game. I'm gonna show them how to play it. I'm gonna get them going, but then I'm gonna sort of step back and just watch and facilitate as needed. I think that's, it's important to be thinking about that. Were there what other ahas, or where you realized, oh, I already do that, or you heard about something that you're really interested in thinking about how to use?
Elizabeth, this hasn't come up in the slides yet, but talking about the disability, talking with children about the disability.
I would say that that's an environmental practice, and that goes along with the idea of stories about it. So yeah, it's particularly for children who are demonstrating more significant disabilities or have behaviors. So absolutely, there's and I think we're also going to see more around that. There is more movement in the disability community at large in sort of demystifying this, that it's not, it's a disability is really just another characteristic of somebody. And so how can we talk about that and facilitate talking about it with even very young children? We're also hearing much more about that around racism as well, that we need to be talking about these things with children. Yeah. So one of the challenges I know for young children is that one of the best ways, a great way to start conversations like that is by using children's literature. But there is not a lot of good children's literature out there.
Yeah. But
yeah, absolutely. Having that conversation. I would also kind of challenge you to think about how you could involve the family and families in that, but the family of the child with a disability. I want to support their social interactions, but I think it's important that his friends understand, what are some things you want them to know about your child, and getting their perspective on that.
Mm-hmm. And the child themselves, what
do
they want other children to know? Okay.
And there's a lot going on, again, this is more at the older and adult end, but it will it'll come down to the younger ages as well. But so one of the things that we're seeing happen are self-advocacy networks. So there is a autism self-advocacy network. I think that's what the name of it is. So this is adults now who have autism. Well, we didn't really know about autism many years ago.
Right.
Like it's evolved, right? So now these are the children who, when we first put a name to autism and started to understand it, they're now adults and they're forming their own network to support one another and to advocate, to teach us what it is that we want to know. And we're learning a lot from them, and a lot of things that we didn't want to hear because we might not have done things the right way, but they're very important voices.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be really beneficial. That's a good idea. I wonder if we could have a student who maybe has graduated come in and talk with some other kids.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
That'd be
that might be
fantastic.
good at the high school level too.
And to talk to adults too. Let me give you my perspective of what it was like being in school, and have, and here's what was great, and here's what I really didn't like.
Yeah, that would be great. I like that idea.
Absolutely.
Do you have any titles of picture books that you would recommend?
There's going to be some slides at the end that will have some resources on it. And some of those resources will have children's literature.
Okay, thank you.
But as I said before, that this is an area, so if anybody's interested in writing children's books or illustrating children's books, this is an area that we do need more literature on for children.
It's a good idea.
That's going to be my next career. I don't think it was in my bio, but just so you guys know, now that we're like, almost 3/4 of the way through this, I started out as an early childhood teacher, went on to get my master's in early childhood special education. I worked in Connecticut in the Birth to 3 system, and I worked as a preschool education teacher. So before getting my PhD and moving on into this, I was boots on the ground and loved it, but just wanted to, was kind of frustrated with the system. And so I decided, well, instead of just being frustrated with it, I'm going to go fix it.
Good for you.
Yeah, we'll see how that turns out. But anyway.
Well, this right here is beneficial. You're starting to fix it.
Good. Well, you got, like I said at the outset, I truly believe that paraeducators are an utilized, underappreciated workforce and population, and that you need a lot more resources, including training. You guys spend a lot of time with your students.
You're right.
So were there any other sort of aha moments or things or takeaways from that overview? I heard lots of great stuff, so I'm glad to hear that. I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen, and all right, so now we're going to turn our attention to COVID-19. So the focus of this is as how do we get peers to children to interact with one another in order for them to be successful? Well, we've had our whole lives turned upside down by this pandemic, starting with the fact that schools shut down overnight, and kids, all children, including children with disabilities, were home. And were home without services for an extended period of time, particularly children with disabilities. the data that tells us that children who were receiving IDEA services, they had an IEP or an IFSP if they were under the age of 3, did not receive their services. And once they started receiving their services, they did not receive the services at the same level that they had before, because it was very difficult to figure out, how do you teach children with disabilities through a computer? And so there was a lot of learning that had to happen. And I think it was different for every age group and a challenge to everybody. So there's going to be residual impacts of that on children's overall development. And what we're hearing a lot about, and there's a lot of concern about, is children's mental health. Children's mental health is going to overlap with their ability to socially interact. Because part of what enables us to interact with other people requires us to have healthy minds, healthy regulatory systems. And this pandemic has affected all of us, but in particular, children, all children, and especially children with disabilities. So I want us just to talk a little bit about what it is that you're seeing, how the ongoing use of masks and social isolation, social distancing, has affected children's relationships with each other, affects your ability to promote those relationships with each other. Think about what we can do to support children's mental health and what we can do to support peer social interactions when we have these public health restrictions in place. And this is really just a brainstorming activity. Unfortunately, I don't have magic answers to this one because this hasn't been going on long enough for there to be sort of a research database to go to say, hey, here's what you do. So we have to rely on what it is that we know, and think about how we keep our attention on this, even though it was challenging before the pandemic. Now it's even more challenging. So I want to start by hearing from you guys with what are you seeing in the children that you're teaching? What have the effects of this pandemic been on them?
I think some of them have lost some of the knowledge that they knew. So we've had to go back and reteach some of the things that has already been taught, or things that they were doing 100% of the time, they suddenly couldn't remember how to do, putting their lunch number in for lunch, something that they've done every day for, the numbers haven't changed, and they've lost some of those skills.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Chris.
What I've noticed with my student is a fearfulness that wasn't there before. Like if I take one step out of the classroom and she didn't hear me say, I'm going to be right outside the door, I'm just doing this and I'll be right back. She's got it. I have to be in her line of vision. And sometimes there is real panic and sheer fear that wasn't there before. And she spent most of last year remote. She only came back the last 4 weeks of last year. So she missed about 1.5 years of being out and about and being independent.
And how old is she?
3rd grade, but she's 9.
Okay. Well, and in that year, she was also home with her family. And so one of the things to also think about in this has to do with children's attachment. And because children's attachment, starting with their family, is really the basis for all learning. And it really, if you really follow the trail down in terms of social competence, children who have strong attachments with their parents are going to do better. Children who do not have strong attachments with their parents are going to have a much harder time with that. And when you say that, it makes me wonder about children's attachment. What happened to that attachment with the family? I mean, was it a positive experience being at home all the time with their family? Was it not? Was there a loss from not being in school and being with peers? And did that hurt? Because here's the thing with attachment. So that's the primary attachment is with your family. but there is research that tells us that children can form secondary attachment relations with their teachers or their paraeducators who are with them. They also form attachments to other children. That's friendship. And so really there was broken attachment relations there. Now she's back in school. So who knows what, you know, how she's feeling about being away from her family, but she lost you once. You know, who's to say she's not going to lose you again? And then there's a lot I'm hearing about really obvious signs of mental health issues in children, which is what you're describing.
We
I
have
also-
noticed, oops, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We have noticed across the board, and this is not with just special education students, is a real significant decrease in academics across the board.
Children lost a year of learning. And how do we put compensatory educational measures in place for all children?
Yeah.
And what is this going to mean going forward? What is this going to mean in education, but in special education? I mean, are more children now going to need, if we think about like those multi-tiered systems of supports, so now nobody's at tier 1. Now the baseline is tier 2, where everybody's going to need some more individualized,
Everybody, yeah.
targeted support. Do we have the staff and capacity to do that? Because at the same time, we're also hearing about teachers and paraeducators leaving the field in droves. And so what does that mean? And then of course, we're going to bump more kids up into that third tier, because those kids who were at tier 2 after the effects of the lost all of what they had are now going to be more in a third tier. So it's really, it puts the educational system in a real, I don't want to say crisis, but it is. But I also think I think it's an opportunity. I'm hoping it's going to be an opportunity that we're going to get the attention, and I think we are, of policymakers and funders who will start putting what we need in place in order to rebuild this system and really support children and families.
And maybe look at how strenuous this curriculum is. The expectations are really high, really, really high.
And that was a pre-pandemic struggle.
Right.
And I'd like to go on that idea about the curriculum and the academics, because as a teacher who teaches kids with special needs, and you're talking about opportunities to socialize, I find with my students who are in within the general ed classroom, it's very difficult for them to have opportunities to socialize, because there's so much catch up that the teachers are demanded to do, that I find that I'm working with the typical student to model for that typical student, to provide supports for my students who are in the mainstream, who might need support, who might need help logging into their Chromebook, who might need help finding where they are in the Google Classroom, or when the teacher is moving forward and not getting up and, pointing to exactly where. So not only is it the social interpersonal relationships, but it's a helping relationship too, that the student with special needs feels comfortable enough to ask her typical classmate for help. And then how do I motivate that typical classmate to be there to help?
Provide the help.
Needs.
Yeah.
So I'm finding that I'm providing praise, or little token, like
That was a strategy.
or something to teach or get the child who knows what she's doing in the class, a typical peer, to help her classmates. And even not students with special needs, like you said, a lot of our students have
fallen behind and they're not identified. And special ed cannot handle more students
Right,
being
well,
identified.
special education was overloaded to begin with. One
Yeah.
thing I want to point out about what you said is that there is a researcher in the field who did a lot around peer-mediated interventions and had developed a fantastic early childhood program that really supported friendships. His focus was on friendship. And he, in his work, identified friendship behaviors. And I didn't include that in these particular strategies because it's more like a way of thinking about the kinds of behaviors you want to see children engage in. One of those is help giving. That's a very important part of friendship. So there's affection, there's help giving, there's, you know, some of what you were describing, rough and tumble play. I mean, you know, we got to be careful, but that's a part of it. There's being responsive to children. So there's helping one another it's a friendship behavior. So, and then you went on to describe how it is that you as the adult, what it is that you do to make sure that happens by praising them for doing it, by asking them to do it and praising them for doing it, which is perfect, going in exactly the right direction.
What I also found was a lot of, and these are just even the regular students, because they were home, they tend to use their devices more to look at things. And they seem to have kind of forgotten how to interact with each other in the classroom.
Yeah, I'm hearing that too.
Yeah. I found that was kind of, and to even just towards the end of the day, as soon as right before dismissal starts, the phones come out, you know, and they're talking to each other and stuff. And it just kind of, even in group discussions, you know, to try to get them to speak up and to come up with ideas, and that brainstorming thing has sort of gone by the wayside because they're not used to talking to each other face to face. And it's that whole face to face.
Well, and when you're in that group though, are they talking to one another face to face, or they have masks on, right?
Right. That's the other thing.
They're still, I mean, what does that do? How does that change the dynamic? They can only see the lower part of their friends or peers' face. And that's what tells us when we're smiling. That's what tells us when we're talking. So I think the mask itself, even though we need it to protect ourselves from the virus, is a barrier for social interactions. And that's where I would say, like, when you look back on those 4 categories, there was really, it's a continuum of least intensive to most intensive. That's where I would really encourage you to think about, how can I combine those approaches? That's the most intensive part. Where you're really thinking about, how am I going to use direct instruction here? I have to teach them. If they don't have the skills right now, they maybe had it before, looks like they lost it. And on top of that, there's a mask in the way, and they have to be 6 feet away from one another. So what can I do to teach them? And again, I wish I could then say, and do this, this, and this. I don't have all the answers, but you have described to me from the very beginning, I have total faith in your ability to come up with that, because you've already been using strategies in the past. Now it's thinking about, how do I use them under these conditions?
As a suggestion for that, I have to commend Simsbury School Systems, because they do a lot of social emotional learning. And that, because of COVID and because of the distance between kids and the inability to see facial expressions, et cetera, that social emotional learning time slots that we have are extremely beneficial. I don't know if you do that at every school or at the high schools, but it's a really good thing to have.
I would say based on my knowledge of Connecticut, and really this isn't just Connecticut, but it's going to be different district to district. It's going to be the vision within a district of the leadership with an eye towards social emotional learning. And it's social emotional learning is when you look at social emotional learning as being in direct competition with meeting the needs around accountability for children learning things related to the Common Core and everything else, then some districts don't attend to it and have not attended to it. I think this is also where I go sometimes in thinking like, well, maybe this is an opportunity, because maybe now it's going to be so bad, this is terrible, but it's going to be so bad that we're going to be forced to. And maybe we're going to be forced to think about a Common Core for social emotional learning, that not only do we want kids to be reading at grade level, we want kids to have the social emotional regulatory, whatever abilities to be able to engage in the learning that leads to them being able to read on grade level.
Yeah, it's just as important.
It's without it, you're just spinning your wheels. Yeah. Because in order to be able to sit and to learn and to read, you have to have the social emotional capacity to do it. As you can tell, I'm up on my pedestal when it comes to this. I'm a big proponent of social emotional learning.
Norwalk has, at the elementary level anyway, has been doing a very good job as well, that there is time blocked out, and the teachers that I've experienced in the past, end of last year and this year, are very serious about sticking to it and talking with the kids and going through the lessons for the social emotional.
That's good. I think, it has to be a priority at the leadership level. And one of the things that, that may happen is, at the state level, of course, you had your fabulous Commissioner of Education who you lost, but who at the state level, if it may become a priority through the Department of Education, who can, put out recommendations. And I think we are going to see things like that. I think from what I'm hearing, and everything I'm hearing right now is mostly anecdotal and sort of reflection in the literature. I'm down in Florida now. I've also talked to teachers down here in Florida, and I've heard heartbreaking stories about what kids are looking like as they return to school. So we may start to see guidance around the use of social emotional learning strategies being incorporated more into the curriculum. So I think, you guys, it sounds like you're really seeing some real challenges. But hopefully you have gained some information tonight that, although developed before COVID, you can think about how you use in a time of COVID. I am going to provide you with some resources. You should have, these are all hyperlinked in the PowerPoint. I'm also going to be including my email in this. So if for some reason you can't get to something, just email me. But the first, and this is basic, this is mostly for early childhood. So for those of you who are working with older students, if you want to just shoot me an email, I can connect you to some other resources that are out there for older ages. So for those of you junior high and high school, those of you at the elementary age, these will be appropriate. But the first is the National Center on Pyramid Model Innovations. And the pyramid model is, it's a 3-tier pyramid. So it's a multi-tiered system of support related to promoting social competence in children by reducing challenging behaviors. And Caitlin, you had asked about literature. That would be the site that I would send you to. If you aren't finding what you're looking for, just shoot me an email and let me know. The second is there are the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center practice guides offers basically checklists for some of what we went over tonight. So if you're looking for more ideas, detailed ideas and strategies, you can utilize that. The embedded instruction for early learning is basically about how you use the practices that we went over tonight, embedded into those activities that where you're in your daily classroom routine where you have kids with and without disabilities. So it's not that you're having to create a whole new thing. You're just using them as part of what's already going on. And the Connect modules are really just a way to that sort of illustrate that a little bit further.
What I found was a lot of the behavior issues. Kids had already had some behavior issues before COVID started, and have come back. And last year we had a lot of the IEPs and 504s we were working with them face to face. But it just seemed like for some reason they did have, those were the ones with that little bit of behavior, but boy, they pushed the buttons. It was to the point where, you know, you've got 5 or 6 kids, you've got the assistant principal coming down, and, you know, while he's working or talking to one child, the other ones are you know, trying to climb into the lockers, and it was tough, and it's still to this now, even coming back as in late August, September, we're still dealing with some of these behaviors that I don't know if they've been learned at home, for the fact that they're home more often, they've got more access to social media and are doing spending more time on that, sneaking it in. But some of the behaviors are just pretty bad.
There is a lot of research being done, in particular around infant and early childhood mental health, but I think it applies to all mental health. I put a resource in the link. This is a book. It's very inexpensive. You can get it. I got it $15 on my Kindle. This woman delivered a keynote at my national conference last week. And basically there's a way of reframing behavior in that it's basically an expression of inner turmoil, for lack of a better word. And that we have to rethink how we think about behaviors, because until we understand that, we're not going to be able to help. And so I think what you're seeing is in these are children who already had poor regulatory systems. Right. They have sensory processing disorders. They have and other things mental health issues associated with their disability. And the pandemic exacerbated it. And not only that, their parents maybe are experiencing, because now so many people are experiencing mental health issues. Stress. Are they in a family where, you know, did somebody lose a job? Did somebody die from COVID? All of these things that have happened over the past 18 months. Could this child have been affected by it? They already had the system that was not operating well to begin with, and this has made it worse. And so those behaviors, like climbing into a locker, that kid is trying to get away. I want to get into the smallest, tightest space possible and be far away from you. And so that's what this book describes. And I think it will be helpful for thinking about what we're seeing in children. Children who had behaviors pre-pandemic and the behaviors that we're seeing now, that they are being impacted. Their underlying neurological systems have been impacted by what's happened. The same thing with what you were describing, Chris. That panic and needing you to be right there. is, that's a real visible expression of a child who is not emotionally regulated right now, and who's living in a state of fear and anxiety. And when we live in that state, it does things to our brain, and causes sort of really primitive sort of reactions that look like what you just described.
And the name of that book?
It's behind, I put it in the chat. It's called
Okay.
Beyond Behaviors.
Okay.
Yes, I can. If you guys, I'm just gonna need to get, I have yours, Donna. Your email address. If you have access to the chat, just put your email in there. And we'll get you the PowerPoint. But yes, and it's on Amazon.
Okay.
And the author's name is Mona Delahook.
As in H-O-O-K or?
H-O-O-K-E.
Okay.
I think unfortunately, because of COVID, a lot of children who don't have maybe the best home environments,
Yep.
Came back, and we have to kind of undo a lot of behavioral.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have the food, we
absolutely.
have one with the food dependency, that the food insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
and just gets his free breakfast, but then decides, oh, well, I don't feel like eating that, so they'll throw it out, and then 20 minutes later they're screaming they're hungry. And it's like, why are you wasting this food? And it got to the point where last year we were actually setting up intervals when you were allowed to have an extra snack. You have what you have, you need to finish what you have before you can go ahead and ask for something else. And it got to the point where, and it's still with this particular student, cabinets are locked. Because they'll just go right in there and start scavenging and throwing things around, looking for, because of the home environment, mostly. But we find that's, and once they get to middle school, they're not little. I mean, these kids are strong. These kids are strong. It's not like you can take a little kid and just say, sit down, or maybe you can put your hand on their shoulder and just, give them that pat to help calm them down, because these kids are just, like I said, big and angry.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, we have to watch for ourselves more than anything else.
Well, I do think another very vulnerable population of children are those in which there was concerns in the home in the first place. And that became clear right at the beginning of the pandemic, because school sometimes is the safest place for kids to go to. And it is the place where they get their meal from. And that went away. And if those are children who have disabilities, who are very young, and they might not understand why it went away, I go back to that attachment issue of there was a loss. And what does that do to children?
Absolutely.
Well, guys, it is 6:32. So can you see this slide? Am I not? Let me just share one more time so you can see. I have included my email here. I got yours, so I will send the PowerPoint out to you guys, but you have my email here. Reach out to me if there's even any questions, further questions. You're looking for a resource, I'm more than happy to help. Again, I know you guys are on the front line, and any way that I can support you. I know that I'm doing my part to support kids and families during this really crazy time in our world.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to thank you all again for joining us this evening. Please remember to click the link in the chat box to fill out a quick survey. If you need a certificate of completion for this webinar, please email Anna Mowry at amowrey@aftct.org. I will also include her email in the chat box. I hope you'll join us in the future for upcoming professional development opportunities we have going on for our members. Those webinars can be found on the calendar of our website, www.aftct.org. Thank you for all that you do, and I hope you enjoy your evening.